Imagine a universe where the background hum of innovation suddenly stops, where trade routes that had flourished for millennia become barren space highways, where the most brilliant minds in the galaxy pack up their research and disappear into the void, taking with them the solutions to problems no one else even knew existed. This is what happened when humanity chose to leave. For 300 years, humans had been the galaxy's greatest gift and its most underestimated species. While others saw them as weak, short-lived creatures barely worth notice, humanity quietly became the invisible foundation holding galactic civilization together. They were the engineers who kept impossible technologies running, the diplomats who prevented wars before they started, the researchers who solved the unsolvable, and the caregivers who healed both bodies and broken spirits across 1,000 worlds. But respect, recognition, basic decency, those were luxuries the galaxy never thought to offer, until the day humanity decided they'd had enough. Until the morning when 12 billion humans across 300 worlds simply left. No warnings, no negotiations, no second chances, just empty laboratories, silent factories, and a galaxy about to learn the difference between surviving and thriving. This is the story of what happened when the galaxy's most essential species decided to find a new home among the stars, and left everyone else to face the true cost of losing them. Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of Laboratory 7, feeling the gentle vibration of the massive quantum processors humming beneath the station's surface. In 6 hours, this vibration would stop forever. In 6 hours, she would join 12 billion other humans in the largest coordinated exodus in galactic history. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was standing in the very laboratory where she had solved the Kepler paradox 3 years ago, a mathematical impossibility that had stumped the galaxy's brightest minds for centuries. The solution had taken her 8 months of 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination, while the station's alien administrators reminded her daily that human minds simply weren't equipped for such complex theoretical work. She had proven them wrong, just as humans had been proving the galaxy wrong for 300 years. Dr. Chun, the voice belonged to Zeph-9, one of the crystalline administrators who managed the research station. His translucent form shimmered with nervous energy as he approached, his internal light fluctuating in patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as anxiety. "We need to discuss the transition protocols for your research. Surely you cannot simply abandon decades of groundbreaking work." Sarah turned to face the 8-foot-tall being, her expression calm despite the storm of emotions churning in her chest. "There is no transition, Administrator. The work dies with my departure. But the applications, the technologies derived from your quantum consciousness theories have revolutionized neural interfaces across 47 species. The medical applications alone have saved millions of lives. And yet," Sarah said quietly, "when my research partner Dr. Martinez was passed over for the Galactic Science Council position last month, the committee said humans lacked the intellectual sophistication for such important roles." Zeph-9's light dimmed. The committee's exact words had been far harsher, including suggestions that humans were better suited to manual labor than theoretical sciences. Sarah had been in the room when they delivered their decision, watching a man who had revolutionized xenobiology get dismissed as intellectually limited by his species' primitive neural architecture. "That was an unfortunate choice of words," the crystalline said carefully. "Unfortunate?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Like when the Hegemony Council decided human medical practices were quaint but primitive despite our trauma medicine having the highest survival rates in the galaxy. Like when the Trade Federation classified human engineering as adequate for simple tasks while using our innovations in 70% of their fleet designs. Like when the Academic Assembly refused to translate human literature because our limited emotional range made it irrelevant to civilized species." Each example hit Zeph-9 like a physical blow. His form flickered more rapidly as he processed the implications. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a systematic pattern of dismissal and condescension that had characterized human-alien relations for 3 centuries. "But surely we can reach an understanding," he said desperately. "Your species has made invaluable contributions, has it?" Sarah's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. Then, why are there no humans in the Galactic Senate? Why do human colonies receive the least favorable trade agreements? Why are human students required to score 30% higher than other species for admission to advanced programs? Zeph9 had no answer. The questions hung in the air like accusations, each one highlighting a different aspect of the galaxy's systematic marginalization of humanity. Sarah walked to her personal workstation and began removing her research data cores. Each crystal represented years of work, theories that could reshape understanding of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the fundamental nature of reality. She sealed them carefully in a containment case designed to survive anything short of a direct hit from a stellar collapse. "Where will you go?" Zeph9 asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Away," Sarah replied simply. "Far enough that the galaxy will have to solve its own problems for once." As if summoned by their conversation, the laboratory's communication system activated with an urgent priority signal. The holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing Administrator Vorthka, the station's highest-ranking official. The hegemony representative's 4 arms gestured frantically as he spoke. "Emergency station-wide announcement." His synthesized voice echoed through the laboratory. "All human personnel are required to report to Conference Hall 1 immediately for mandatory renegotiation talks." Sarah and Zeph9 exchanged glances. The crystalline being's light pattern shifted to what Sarah recognized as confusion mixed with growing alarm. "Renegotiation?" Sarah said quietly. Interesting choice of words. They made their way through the station's corridors together, passing dozens of other humans heading in the same direction. Sarah noted the expressions on her colleagues' faces, not fear or uncertainty, but grim determination. These were people who had made their choice and were prepared to see it through. Conference Hall 1 was the largest gathering space on the station, designed to accommodate meetings between multiple species. Today, it held all 847 human researchers, engineers, medical personnel, and support staff who worked on the facility. They stood together in the center of the room, while representatives from 6 different alien species formed a circle around them. Administrator Vorthka stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows over the assembled humans. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," he began, his tone suggesting he was addressing particularly slow children. "We have received reports that human personnel across the galaxy are abandoning their positions without proper authorization or transition procedures." "There's no misunderstanding," said Dr. James Rodriguez, the station's head of engineering. "We're leaving. All of us. Today. That is unacceptable." Vorthka's voice rose. "You have contractual obligations, legal responsibilities. You cannot simply abandon critical infrastructure and research projects." "Watch us," said Dr. Lisa Park, the station's chief medical officer. The simple statement carried absolute finality. A murmur ran through the alien representatives as they processed this unexpected resistance. Humans didn't fight back. Humans didn't make demands. Humans accepted their place in the galactic hierarchy and worked quietly in the background while others took credit for their achievements. "You're being emotional and irrational," said Counselor Heshtem, the station's reptilian psychology specialist. "This reaction is clearly the result of your species' primitive psychological development. We can provide therapy to help you overcome these destructive impulses." The silence that followed was profound. 847 humans stared at the alien representatives with expressions that had gone completely cold. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Primitive," he said quietly. "Let me tell you about Primitive, Counselor. Primitive is a species that can't figure out how to maintain their own technology without human engineers. Primitive is a galactic government that can't prevent wars without human diplomats. Primitive is a medical establishment that watched plague ravage the Outer Rim for 6 months until human doctors arrived with a cure they developed in 3 weeks. Now see here," Vorthka began. "Primitive," Dr. Park continued seamlessly, "is a trade federation that can't transport goods efficiently without human logistics coordinators. Primitive is an academic system that can't solve theoretical problems without human researchers. Primitive is a civilization so advanced that it can't function without the help of the species it considers inferior." The alien representatives exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't how humans behaved. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. You need us, said Dr. Chun, speaking for the first time since entering the hall. You've always needed us. The difference is that we've finally realized you'll never admit it. Administrator Vorthka's tone turned threatening. If you abandon your positions, you'll be in violation of galactic labor laws. There will be consequences. Economic sanctions, travel restrictions, exclusion from galactic commerce. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You're welcome to try. But first, you might want to check how many of the systems enforcing those laws were designed and maintained by humans. As if to punctuate his words, the station's lights flickered momentarily. Then, the gravity generators hiccuped, causing everyone to stumble slightly. The environmental systems made a grinding noise that hadn't been there an hour ago. What's happening? Zeph9 asked, his crystalline form pulsing with alarm. Scheduled maintenance protocols, Dr. Rodriguez said calmly. Funny thing about human engineering, we tend to build systems that require regular attention from people who actually understand them. The implications hit the assembled aliens like a cascading series of revelations. Human engineers maintained the life support systems. Human technicians kept the quantum computers functioning. Human programmers wrote the software that ran everything from navigation to communication networks. The transport ships leaving the station in 4 hours have room for every human on board, Dr. Park announced to her colleagues. Departure is voluntary, but it's also final. Anyone who chooses to stay will not be welcome at our destination. And where exactly is this destination? Demanded Vorthka. Dr. Chin's smile was enigmatic. Somewhere you can't follow us. Somewhere you can't find us. Somewhere we can build something better than what you've offered us here. The human evacuation began exactly on schedule. Throughout the station, human personnel calmly completed their shutdown procedures, secured their research, and gathered their personal belongings. They moved with the efficiency that had made them invaluable to galactic civilization. But now that efficiency was being turned toward leaving it behind. Sarah Chun was among the last to board the transport ships. As she walked up the loading ramp, she felt Zeph9's presence behind her. Doctor, he called out. Please, reconsider. Whatever we've done wrong, we can fix it. We can change. Sarah paused at the top of the ramp and turned back. 300 years, she said softly. We gave you 300 years to change. We solved your problems, healed your sick, built your impossible machines, and kept your civilization running. In return, you gave us contempt, condescension, and systematic exclusion from the very society we helped build. But the galaxy made its choice, Administrator. It decided we weren't worth treating as equals. Now we're making our choice. We're deciding you're not worth staying for. The loading ramp sealed with a soft hiss, cutting off any reply. Within minutes, the transport ships were lifting off from the station's docking bays, carrying their human cargo toward a destiny that none of the remaining aliens could fathom. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, the first system failures began cascading through the station. The quantum processors that had hummed reassuringly for decades started producing error codes that no one remaining could interpret. The medical bay's diagnostic equipment began malfunctioning without human technicians to maintain its delicate calibrations. The station's advanced communication array started losing signal clarity as its human-designed error correction protocols gradually degraded. Administrator Vorthka stood in his office, staring at the growing list of system failures being reported across the station. For the first time in his long career, he began to understand the true scope of humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. And, for the first time, he began to fear what the galaxy would become without them. 3 weeks after the human exodus began, Senator Kevmore of the Galactic Council stood before an emergency assembly that would have been unthinkable just a month earlier. Representatives from 400 species filled the vast amphitheater of the council chambers, their various forms creating a chaotic symphony of movement, sound, and bioluminescent displays. What united them wasn't celebration or routine governance. It was panic. The situation reports continue to deteriorate, Senator Kevmore announced, his 6-fingered hands trembling slightly as he held the data tablet. The Andorian Trade Hub's central computer core suffered a complete failure yesterday. Without human maintenance protocols, they estimate full system restoration will take 18 months if they can find replacement specialists. A ripple of concerned sounds echoed through the assembly. The Andorian hub processed nearly 40% of galactic commerce. Its failure would create supply chain disruptions across hundreds of worlds. The vegan colonies have lost primary life support on 7 terraforming platforms, continued another senator. The backup systems are functioning, but without human engineers to perform scheduled maintenance, they project total environmental collapse within 6 months. What about the medical crisis on Kepler-7? Called out Counselor Zesh from the reptilian delegation. The plague outbreak there has already killed 12,000 beings. Their medical facilities are completely overwhelmed without human doctors. Senator Kevmore's expression grew more grave. The situation on Kepler-7 represents our most immediate catastrophe. The pathogen appears to be a mutation of the red scale virus that devastated the Outer Rim 2 years ago. Human medical teams developed the only known effective treatment protocol. Without them, he didn't need to finish. Everyone in the chamber understood the implications. Kepler-7 housed over 3 million inhabitants across multiple species. A plague without effective treatment could become a galactic catastrophe. "This is madness," shouted Administrator Vorthka, who had traveled from his research station specifically for this emergency session. One primitive species cannot simply hold the galaxy hostage. We have thousands of brilliant scientists, engineers, and doctors from hundreds of advanced civilizations. And yet, said Counselor Reshti of the Academic Assembly, her tone carefully neutral, our brilliant scientists cannot interpret the quantum mathematics that human researchers developed. Our advanced engineers cannot maintain the fusion reactors that human designers created. Our superior doctors cannot treat patients using medical techniques that human physicians pioneered. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes about the reality they were all beginning to confront. Dr. Zaxxon Prime, the galaxy's most respected theoretical physicist and a member of the prestigious Crystalline Collective, rose slowly from his position in the assembly. His translucent form flickered with patterns that indicated deep contemplation and growing concern. "I have spent the past 3 weeks attempting to understand the mathematical foundations of human quantum consciousness theory," he announced to the assembly. "This theory underlies the neural interface technology that 96% of our medical equipment relies upon for patient monitoring and treatment." He paused, his internal light dimming with what could only be described as embarrassment. "I cannot comprehend even the basic principles. The mathematical concepts involved appear to require cognitive frameworks that our species simply do not possess." The admission sent shock waves through the assembly. Dr. Zaxxon Prime was considered one of the most brilliant minds in galactic history. If he couldn't understand human theoretical work, what hope did anyone else have? "Surely this is simply a matter of time and effort," suggested Counselor Meshka of the Engineering Guild. "Given sufficient resources and study, we can reverse engineer human innovations." "Can we?" Dr. Zaxxon Prime's response carried a weight of profound uncertainty. Human neural architecture appears to process certain types of complex information in ways that are fundamentally different from other known species. Their ability to see patterns that escape other minds, to make intuitive leaps that lead to breakthrough discoveries, to synthesize disparate concepts into unified theories. These may not be skills that can simply be learned or replicated. Captain Thuras of the Hegemony Defense Forces stood to address the assembly. His massive frame and scarred carapace spoke to decades of military service across the galaxy's most dangerous regions. "The defense implications are equally serious," he announced grimly. "Human strategic thinking has prevented 14 major conflicts in the past decade alone. Their diplomatic corps has negotiated peace treaties that our own specialists considered impossible. Without human peacekeepers and negotiators, we're already seeing rising tensions in 7 sectors." "What kind of rising tensions?" Senator Kevmore asked, though his expression suggested he already feared the answer. "Border disputes that human mediators have kept stable for 50 years are erupting into armed conflicts. The Zalera Proxima trade disagreement escalated to military posturing within days of human diplomatic withdrawal. The ancient territorial dispute between the Aquatic Federation and the Desert Worlds has reignited after 30 years of human-brokered peace." Captain Thuras activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's current conflict zones. Red markers indicating active hostilities or dangerous tensions had more than tripled in just 3 weeks. Human peacekeepers don't just prevent wars, he continued. They understand how to address the underlying causes of conflicts. They see connections between seemingly unrelated issues. They find solutions that satisfy all parties involved while other species focus on victory and defeat. Administrator Vorthkos stood again, his 4 arms gesturing frantically. This is all temporary, he insisted. These problems existed before humans became involved. We simply need to return to our previous methods of handling these issues. Previous methods? Counselor Reshti's voice carried a sharp edge. You mean the methods that led to the 1,000-Year War? The approaches that created the Great Famine of the Inner Worlds? The strategies that resulted in the extinction of 6 species and the collapse of the First Galactic Republic? The historical reminders hit the assembly like physical blows. The galaxy's pre-human history was marked by catastrophic conflicts, devastating plagues, technological stagnation, and social collapse. Humanity's arrival had coincided with an unprecedented era of peace, prosperity, and advancement. Perhaps, suggested Senator Kevmore carefully, we should consider reaching out to the human leadership. Surely negotiations are possible. We could offer them better representation in galactic governance, improved trade agreements, formal recognition of their contributions. What human leadership? Interrupted Dr. Elon Voss of the Intelligence Directorate. Her telepathic species had been monitoring communication networks across the galaxy, searching for any trace of human activity. We cannot locate them. They have disappeared completely from all known space. No communication signals, no ship movements, no trace of their destination. That's impossible, protested Captain Thuris. 12 billion beings cannot simply vanish without leaving some kind of trail. Dr. Elon Voss's expression grew more troubled. Our analysis suggests they have moved beyond the explored regions of the galaxy. They may have traveled to territories that none of our species have ever visited, using navigation techniques that we do not understand. Or, said Dr. Zaxxon Prime quietly, they may have developed transportation technologies that we cannot detect or follow. The implications of this possibility sent another wave of unease through the assembly. If humans had access to advanced technologies that exceeded galactic understanding, what else might they have developed during their centuries of quiet work in the background of galactic civilization? The immediate crisis requires immediate action, declared Senator Kevmore, attempting to restore some sense of control to the proceedings. We need to establish emergency response teams to address the most critical system failures. We need to reassign personnel to maintain essential infrastructure. We need to prioritize the most serious threats to galactic stability. With what personnel? Asked Counselor Meshka. The humans weren't just workers. They were the specialists who trained our workers. They were the experts who developed our protocols. They were the teachers who educated our next generation of professionals. Take the medical crisis, added Dr. Elon Voss. Human doctors didn't just treat patients. They trained alien doctors in advanced treatment techniques. They developed the protocols that our medical schools use to educate new physicians. Without them, not only do we lose their expertise, but we lose the ability to train replacements. The assembly fell into a stunned silence as the full scope of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became clear. They hadn't been merely contributors. They had been the foundation upon which modern galactic society was built. How long? Senator Kevmore asked quietly. How long do we have before the cascade failures become irreversible? Dr. Zaxxon Prime consulted a complex data display that showed system status reports from across the galaxy. Based on current deterioration rates, we have perhaps 6 months before critical infrastructure begins failing completely. 12 months before we face civilization-level collapses. 18 months before we risk returning to pre-industrial technological levels in many sectors. And the medical crises? Weeks, not months. The plague on Kepler-7 is already spreading to neighboring systems. Without effective treatments, we could see pandemic-level casualties within a very short time frame. Administrator Vorthkos slumped in his seat, the reality of the situation finally penetrating his denial. What have we done? He whispered. We treated the galaxy's most essential species as our least important citizens, Counselor Reshti replied with brutal honesty. We took everything they gave us and gave them nothing in return except condescension and exclusion. But surely they cannot simply abandon everyone, protested Senator Kevmore. They saved lives, prevented wars, advanced knowledge. These are not the actions of a species that would callously watch others suffer. Dr. Elon Voss shook her head slowly. Our psychological profiles of human behavior suggest otherwise. Humans have powerful protective instincts, but those instincts extend primarily to beings they consider part of their community. For 3 centuries, we made it clear that they were not part of ours. They offered partnership, added Dr. Zaxxon Prime. They sought inclusion. They wanted recognition. We gave them isolation, dismissal, and systematic discrimination. Why should they sacrifice themselves for a society that rejected them? The question hung in the air without answer. Around the great amphitheater, representatives from 400 species grappled with the possibility that they had driven away the one species capable of holding their civilization together. What about their colonies? Suggested Captain Thuras desperately. Human settlements scattered throughout the galaxy. Surely some humans remained behind. Dr. Elon Voss consulted her intelligence reports. Every human colony ship left its system within a 72-hour period. They coordinated this exodus across hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Not a single human settlement remains in any explored sector of the galaxy. The precision and coordination of humanity's departure began to sink in. This wasn't an emotional reaction or a sudden decision. This was a carefully planned, methodically executed withdrawal that had been years in preparation. They knew, realized Administrator Vorthka. They knew they were going to leave. They planned this. Of course they planned it, said Counselor Reshti. What did we expect? That they would tolerate our treatment indefinitely? That they would continue sacrificing their potential for our benefit without ever asking for basic respect in return? As the emergency assembly continued into the night, reports kept arriving from across the galaxy. Each one painted a clearer picture of humanity's true role in galactic civilization. Each one revealed another critical system or process that depended entirely on human expertise. And each one drove home the inescapable conclusion that the galaxy had just lost the one species it could not survive without. 6 months after the human exodus, the Galactic Council chambers had become a place of perpetual crisis management. What had once been orderly sessions focused on trade agreements and cultural exchanges had transformed into desperate emergency meetings addressing cascading system failures across known space. Senator Kevmore looked older than his 800 years as he reviewed the latest catastrophe reports. Dark patches under his eyes and a tremor in his hands spoke to months of sleepless nights and impossible stress. Around him, the emergency council that had replaced normal governance procedures looked equally haggard. The Kepler-7 situation has escalated beyond our worst projections, announced Dr. Elon Voss, her telepathic abilities allowing her to share the grim details directly into the minds of those present. The death toll has reached 2.7 million across 17 systems. The plague has mutated twice, and our medical teams cannot develop effective treatments. What about the research teams we assembled? Asked Counselor Reshti. The combined medical expertise of 50 species working around the clock. Dr. Elon Voss's expression conveyed hopelessness. They cannot replicate the intuitive diagnostic approaches that human doctors employed. The plague responds to treatments in ways that defy our understanding of biological systems. It's as if human medical practitioners possessed insights into the nature of disease that our most advanced xenobiology cannot duplicate. Captain Thuras activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's current military status. Red zones indicating active conflicts had multiplied exponentially, creating a web of violence that stretched across dozens of sectors. The Zalera Proxima conflict has expanded into a full-scale war, he reported grimly. 17 systems are now involved. Casualty estimates exceed 50 million military and civilian deaths. Without human peacekeepers, we cannot find any diplomatic solution that both sides will accept. The desert worlds have invaded 3 aquatic Federation colonies, added Admiral Vorthka, who had been reassigned from his failed research station to emergency military coordination. The Federation's retaliation destroyed 2 entire desert settlements. Both sides are preparing for total war. How many active conflicts are we tracking now? Senator Kevmore asked, though his tone suggested he dreaded the answer. 43, Captain Thuras replied. Plus 68 border disputes that could escalate to armed conflict at any moment. The human diplomatic corps had been preventing or resolving an average of 12 potential wars per month. Without them, these conflicts are exploding faster than we can track them. The economic news was equally devastating. Administrator Wex 9 of the Trade Federation had spent months trying to maintain commerce networks that had been designed and managed by human logistics specialists. Galactic trade volume has dropped by 67%, he announced. The transportation networks that connected our economies were so dependent on human coordination that we cannot maintain efficient cargo movements. Food shipments are arriving spoiled. Industrial components are reaching their destinations months late. Entire planetary economies are collapsing. What about the Andorian trade hub? Asked Senator Kevmore, still non-functional. Our best computer specialists estimate that fully restoring the human-designed systems will take at least 5 years, assuming we can reverse engineer the software architecture at all. Dr. Zaxxon Prime had grown dimmer over the past months, his crystalline form flickering with patterns that indicated deep fatigue and growing despair. Our technological infrastructure continues to degrade at accelerating rates, he reported. The quantum processing cores that powered our advanced research facilities have begun failing throughout the galaxy. Without human maintenance protocols, we cannot prevent the cascade errors that render these systems inoperable. Can we not simply rebuild using pre-human technologies? Suggested Counselor Meshka desperately. We could, Dr. Zaxxon Prime replied slowly. But that would mean abandoning 3 centuries of advancement. Our current civilization depends entirely on technologies that only humans understood how to maintain and develop. Reverting to pre-human technology levels would be equivalent to accepting civilizational collapse. The scope of their dependence on humanity was becoming more apparent each day, and with it came a growing understanding of just how thoroughly they had underestimated the species they had dismissed as primitive. The orbital platforms around Centauri Prime are failing, announced Chief Engineer Yex Delta. The gravitational stabilization systems were designed by human engineers using theoretical principles that we cannot reproduce. Without constant adjustment, the platforms will crash into the planet's surface within 3 months. Centauri Prime housed nearly 1 billion beings across multiple species. The loss of the orbital platforms would trigger an environmental catastrophe beyond imagination. What about evacuation? Asked Senator Kevmore. Where would we evacuate them to? Chief Engineer Yex Delta replied. Similar orbital platforms throughout the galaxy are experiencing the same degradation. The transportation networks are barely functional. We lack the resources to relocate entire planetary populations. Dr. Ilan Voss had been monitoring the psychological impact of the crisis across galactic civilization, and her reports painted an equally troubling picture of social collapse. We are seeing breakdown of civil order on 342 worlds, she announced. Public confidence in galactic governance has collapsed. Many species are withdrawing from interstellar cooperation and focusing on their own survival. The unity that held our civilization together is disintegrating. It's worse than that, added Counselor Reshti. The Academic Assembly has received reports of species beginning to blame each other for the human departure. The crystallines claim that hegemony arrogance drove humans away. The reptilians insist that Academic Assembly elitism was responsible. Everyone is looking for someone else to blame rather than accepting collective responsibility. The irony was bitter and inescapable. Humanity's departure was causing the same kind of fragmentation and conflict that had plagued galactic civilization before their arrival. The unity, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence that had defined the past 3 centuries had depended entirely on human diplomatic efforts, conflict resolution strategies, and bridge building between incompatible cultures. We need to find them, declared Administrator Vorthka. We need to locate the humans and negotiate their return. With what? Asked Dr. Ilan Voss. Our best intelligence networks cannot detect any trace of their location. Our most advanced sensor technology cannot track their ships. They have effectively vanished from the known universe. Then, we search the unknown universe, Vorthka insisted. We send exploration fleets beyond mapped space. We investigate every possible destination. Captain Thuras shook his head. The galaxy contains over 400 billion star systems. The humans could have traveled to any of the 380 billion systems that remain unexplored. Even with our entire fleet committed to the search, it would take millions of years to investigate every possibility. And, added Dr. Zaxxon Prime quietly, we are assuming they remain in this galaxy. Human transportation technology may have advanced beyond our understanding. They could have traveled to entirely different galaxies. The possibility sent chills through the assembled leaders. If humanity had developed faster-than-light travel capabilities that exceeded galactic norms, they truly could be anywhere in the universe. What about communication? Suggested Senator Kevmore. Surely we can send messages into deep space. Appeal to their better nature. Offer them anything they want in return for their assistance. We have been broadcasting continuously on all frequencies, Dr. Elon Voss replied. Appeals for help, offers of negotiation, promises of reform, acknowledgments of past mistakes, everything we can think of. There has been no response. They may not be receiving our messages, said Dr. Zaxxon Prime, or they may be choosing not to respond. The second possibility was more troubling than the first. It suggested that humanity had made a permanent decision to sever all contact with galactic civilization. Let us consider the realistic scenarios, said Counselor Reshti, her voice heavy with the weight of their situation. If we cannot locate humanity, if they will not respond to our communications, if they have permanently departed our region of space, what are our options? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. For months, they had been desperately hoping for a solution that would restore the status quo. Now they were being forced to confront the possibility that such a solution might not exist. We adapt, said Senator Kevmore, though his voice lacked conviction. We learn to maintain our civilization without human assistance. We develop new technologies to replace what we have lost. We find ways to resolve conflicts without human diplomacy. In theory, Dr. Zaxxon Prime replied. But the practical reality is more complex. Human contributions to our civilization weren't simply services that can be replaced. They were fundamental capabilities that other species appear to lack. What do you mean? Asked Administrator Vorthka. I mean that after 6 months of intensive research, we still cannot understand the basic principles underlying human innovations. Not just their advanced work, but their fundamental approaches to problem-solving appear to involve cognitive processes that are unique to their species. Dr. Elon Voss nodded in agreement. Our psychological analysis suggests that human mental architecture processes information in ways that allow them to perceive patterns and solutions that remain invisible to other forms of intelligence. They don't just know things we don't know. They are capable of knowing things we cannot know. The implications were staggering. For centuries, galactic civilization had dismissed humans as intellectually inferior while depending entirely on intellectual capabilities that only humans possessed. There is another consideration, said Captain Thuras grimly. Our military analysis suggests that human departure may not have been entirely peaceful. What do you mean? Senator Kevmore asked. We mean that a species capable of disappearing completely from galactic civilization, of coordinating a simultaneous exodus across hundreds of worlds, of developing technologies that exceed our understanding. Such a species could also defend themselves if they chose to do so. Are you suggesting that humanity poses a military threat? Asked Counselor Reshti. I'm suggesting that we have no idea what humanity is capable of, Captain Thuras replied. We never paid attention to their full potential because we were too busy dismissing them as inferior. Now they are gone, and we have no understanding of what they might do next. The emergency session continued through another night, but no solutions emerged. Every option they considered led to the same inescapable conclusion. Without humanity, galactic civilization was doomed to collapse. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, 12 billion humans were building something new, something that would never again depend on the approval or acceptance of species that had proven incapable of recognizing their worth. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when the foundation of a civilization decided to walk away and start over. 1 year after the human exodus, the galaxy existed in a state that could only be described as controlled collapse. What had once been a thriving civilization of 400 species was rapidly fracturing into isolated enclaves struggling to maintain basic survival, while ancient enemies rekindled conflicts that hadn't burned in centuries. Dr. Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of the New Horizon, humanity's largest colony ship, watching the construction of their new world with quiet satisfaction. In the 12 months since leaving galactic space, humans had accomplished something that their former alien colleagues would have considered impossible. They had built a completely self-sufficient interstellar civilization from scratch. The third orbital platform came online this morning, reported Commander Marcus Rodriguez, approaching with a data tablet displaying construction progress. Full atmospheric processing should be complete within 6 months. The surface colonies are already producing surplus food, and our manufacturing facilities are exceeding all projections. Sarah nodded, her attention still focused on the bustling activity outside the ship's viewports. Dozens of construction vessels moved with choreographed precision, assembling habitat rings that would eventually house millions of humans in comfort and safety. In the distance, the framework of a massive research complex was taking shape, a facility that would dwarf any laboratory in galactic space. "Any word from the deep space reconnaissance teams?" she asked. "They've identified 14 potentially habitable systems within range," Marcus replied. 3 show signs of primitive life that we could help develop. 2 have civilizations at roughly our own technological level that might be interested in genuine partnership. The contrast wasn't lost on either of them. In their first year of independence, humanity had already identified potential partners for mutually beneficial relationships, something they had never been offered during 3 centuries in galactic civilization. "What about the listening posts?" Sarah asked. "Any change in the galactic situation?" Marcus's expression darkened. "It's getting worse. Our long-range sensors are detecting massive ship movements in 17 sectors. The Zalera Proxima conflict has spread to involve nearly a quarter of known space. The plague that started on Kepler-7 has killed over 50 million beings and shows no signs of stopping." Sarah felt a familiar pang of regret. Despite everything that had happened, humans retained their instinctive desire to help others in need. Watching billions of sentient beings suffer while possessing the knowledge to help them violated every humanitarian principle that defined human nature. "Dr. Chun," said a new voice from behind them. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached, carrying intelligence reports that she updated daily from intercepted galactic communications. "You need to see the latest transmissions from the Galactic Council." Sarah accepted the data tablet and began reading. What she found there surprised even her cynical expectations. The Galactic Council had issued a formal declaration labeling humanity as enemies of galactic civilization and had authorized military action to force their return. A joint fleet of over 10,000 ships from 15 species was being assembled to search beyond known space and compel human cooperation through force if necessary. "Enemies," Sarah said quietly. "We saved their civilization for 3 centuries, and now we're enemies because we chose to leave." "It gets worse," Elena said grimly. "They're claiming that human departure was an act of terrorism designed to cause galactic suffering. They're suggesting that we deliberately sabotaged systems before leaving to maximize civilian casualties." Marcus looked incredulous. "We could have sabotaged every major system in the galaxy if we'd wanted to. Instead, we simply stopped maintaining their equipment for them. The failures they're experiencing are the natural result of depending entirely on technologies they never bothered to understand. Logic isn't driving their decisions anymore," Elena pointed out. "They're desperate, scared, and looking for someone to blame. We're convenient scapegoats because we're not there to defend ourselves." Sarah continued reading the intelligence reports, each one revealing more about the galaxy's deteriorating condition. The technological infrastructure was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. The social order was breaking down as species turned on each other in desperate attempts to secure resources and territory. The carefully maintained peace that had lasted 3 centuries was dissolving into conflicts that threatened to return galactic civilization to its dark ages. "How long do our analysts estimate before complete civilizational collapse?" Sarah asked. 18 months, Elena replied. 2 years at the outside. After that, Most species will be too focused on basic survival to maintain interstellar governments or advanced technology. And they think military force will solve this? Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Even if they could find us, even if they could force some humans to return, we can't simply restore 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge and expertise overnight. They don't understand that, Sarah said. They never understood how deep our involvement in their civilization really was. They thought we were replaceable technicians, not the foundation that held everything together. The irony was bitter, but inescapable. In trying to force humanity's return through military action, the galaxy was devoting massive resources to warfare that could have been used to address their critical infrastructure needs. They were accelerating their own collapse while pursuing the very species that could help them prevent it. Dr. Chun, said another voice from across the observation deck. Captain James Park approached with news that would change everything. Long-range sensors have detected an incoming transmission directed specifically at our colony. It's not from the Galactic Council or any official government entity. Source? Sarah asked. A civilian research station in the Rigel sector. The message is from Dr. Zaxxon Prime and a group of scientists calling themselves the Truth Coalition. Sarah recognized the name immediately. Dr. Zaxxon Prime was one of the galaxy's most respected theoretical physicists and had always been more respectful toward human researchers than most of his colleagues. If he was reaching out independently, the situation had become even more desperate than their intelligence reports suggested. Play the message, Sarah instructed. The holographic display activated, showing the familiar crystalline form of Dr. Zaxxon Prime. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by visible distress and something that looked remarkably like shame. Dr. Chun, Dr. Rodriguez, and the human leadership, he began, his translated voice carrying emotional weight. I am speaking on behalf of a coalition of scientists, engineers, and medical professionals from 67 species who have spent the past year trying to understand what we lost when your people departed. The physicist paused, his internal light fluctuating with patterns that indicated deep emotional turmoil. We have failed completely. Not only can we not maintain the technologies you developed, we cannot even comprehend the theoretical principles that made your innovations possible. The medical crisis has become catastrophic. The plague that began on Kepler-7 has mutated beyond our ability to treat. 53 million beings have died, and our epidemiologists project total casualties exceeding 500 million unless effective treatments are developed immediately. Dr. Zaxxon Prime's form flickered with what could only be described as despair. We have assembled the greatest medical minds from across the galaxy. We have combined our knowledge, our resources, our most advanced equipment. Yet we cannot create treatments that human doctors could have developed in days. The message continued with increasingly devastating revelations. The orbital platforms around Centauri Prime had indeed crashed, killing over 300 million inhabitants. The Andorian trade hub's failure had triggered economic collapse across 40 systems. Wars were spreading faster than peace negotiations could contain them. But what troubles us most, Dr. Zaxxon Prime said, is the growing realization of how blind we were to your true contributions. We treated you as inferior while depending entirely on capabilities that only your species possessed. We dismissed your intelligence while using innovations that exceeded our understanding. We excluded you from positions of authority while relying on your expertise to maintain our civilization. The physicist's admission carried a weight of regret that transcended species barriers. The Truth Coalition has spent months reviewing historical records, analyzing the true scope of human involvement in galactic affairs. What we have discovered shames us beyond expression. Human contributions to galactic civilization weren't limited to technology, medicine, and diplomacy. You provided the fundamental insight, creativity, and problem-solving abilities that allowed our society to function. You saw patterns we could not see, made connections we could not make, found solutions we could not imagine. Dr. Zaxxon Prime paused again, gathering the strength for his final admission. We have concluded that human intelligence may operate on fundamentally different principles than other known forms of consciousness. Your mental architecture allows you to process information in ways that produce insights and innovations that are literally impossible for other species to achieve. The implications of this revelation were staggering. For 3 centuries, galactic civilization had dismissed humans as intellectually inferior while depending entirely on intellectual capabilities that only humans could provide. The galaxy is dying, Dr. Zaxxon Prime continued. Not slowly, not gradually, but rapidly and catastrophically. Without your people, we face complete civilizational collapse within 2 years. We know that we have no right to ask for your help. We know that our treatment of humanity was inexcusable and unforgivable. But billions of innocent beings are suffering. Children are dying from diseases you could cure. Entire species face extinction. The knowledge that has accumulated over millions of years of galactic history is being lost forever. The physicist's final words carried the weight of desperation mixed with newfound humility. We cannot offer you what you deserve. We cannot undo the centuries of injustice and dismissal. We can only acknowledge our blindness, admit our dependence, and ask if there is any way, any possibility, that humanity might consider helping us save what remains of galactic civilization. The message ended with coordinates for a private communication channel and a promise that any human response would be kept confidential from galactic governments and military forces. Sarah stared at the now-blank display for several long moments, processing what they had just heard. Around her, the other human leaders remained equally silent, grappling with the moral complexity of their situation. "What do you think?" Marcus asked finally. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that we need to call a general assembly. This decision affects every human in our new civilization. We need to hear all voices before choosing our path." "And your personal opinion?" Elena asked. Sarah looked back out at their thriving new world, then down at the intelligence reports describing galactic suffering on an almost incomprehensible scale. "I think we're about to discover whether humanity's greatest strength is our ability to build something better," she said quietly, "or our inability to watch others suffer when we have the power to help." The decision they made would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization, but the moral foundation of humanity's new future among the stars. The Great Assembly convened in the largest amphitheater humanity had ever constructed, a vast space aboard the flagship New Horizon where representatives from every human colony, ship, and research station could participate in the most important decision their species had ever faced. Dr. Sarah Chun stood at the center of the gathering, looking out at 12,000 faces that represented the voice of all humanity in exile. Engineers who had built impossible machines, doctors who had saved countless lives, diplomats who had prevented wars, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of the universe, all united by their shared experience of rejection and their collective journey to something better. "We have received a communication from galactic civilization," Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater through advanced audio systems that were purely human design. "For the first time since our departure, a group of alien scientists has acknowledged what we always knew, that our contributions to galactic society were not just helpful, but essential." A murmur ran through the assembly as she activated the holographic display and played Dr. Zaxxon Prime's desperate message. 12,000 humans watched in silence as the galaxy's most respected physicist admitted that their former civilization was collapsing without human involvement. When the message ended, Sarah allowed the silence to stretch for several moments before continuing. "The question before us is simple in its asking and complex in its answering. Do we help them?" Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood to address the assembly. "Let me begin by presenting the facts. Our intelligence indicates that galactic civilization will experience complete collapse within 18 to 24 months. Conservative casualty estimates exceed 1 billion deaths. Multiple species face potential extinction. Knowledge accumulated over millions of years will be permanently lost. However," he continued, "we must also consider what returning would mean for humanity. The same governments that dismissed us as inferior are now declaring us enemies. They have assembled military fleets to force our cooperation. Even if we chose to help, we would likely be returning to a situation of exploitation and eventual betrayal." Dr. Elena Vasquez rose to present the medical perspective. "The plague currently ravaging the galaxy could indeed be treated using techniques we developed during similar outbreaks. We could save millions of lives immediately and develop vaccines to prevent future pandemics. The moral weight of this knowledge is significant. But, she added, we must remember that galactic medical establishments rejected our techniques for decades, claiming they were primitive and ineffective. They only want our help now because their own methods have failed catastrophically. The debate that followed would continue for 18 hours and touch on every aspect of human philosophy, ethics, and identity. Speaker after speaker rose to present their perspective on whether humanity should sacrifice their hard-won freedom to help the civilization that had rejected them. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, one of humanity's leading ethicists, presented the moral argument for intervention. We are defined not by how others treat us, but by how we treat others, she argued. If we allow billions to die when we possess the knowledge to save them, we become the very thing we accuse the aliens of being, callous and self-serving. Humanitarian principles don't disappear because we've been wronged. If anything, our experience should make us more committed to treating others with the dignity and respect we were denied. Chief Engineer David Park presented the practical argument against intervention. Even if we wanted to help, the logistics are impossible. Saving galactic civilization would require thousands of human specialists returning to hostile territory, working under alien governments that have declared us enemies, trying to restore systems that have been degraded beyond simple repair. We would be asking our people to sacrifice their safety, their families, and their freedom to help the same societies that spent centuries telling them they weren't good enough to deserve basic respect. The debate revealed fundamental divisions within humanity about their responsibilities to others versus their obligations to themselves. Some argued that humanity's moral superiority was demonstrated by their willingness to help even their enemies. Others contended that humanity's survival required them to prioritize their own needs over galactic welfare. Dr. Robert Kim, a philosopher who had spent decades studying human nature, offered a different perspective. Perhaps we're approaching this wrong, he suggested. The question isn't whether we help them. It's how we help them in a way that protects our interests while serving humanitarian principles. What do you mean? Asked Sarah. I mean that we have something they need, and they have something we can use. Rather than returning as supplicants begging for acceptance, we negotiate as equals who are offering assistance on our own terms. The suggestion sparked intense discussion about what terms humanity might demand and whether such negotiations would be morally acceptable. Some argued that withholding life-saving assistance unless conditions were met was ethically equivalent to murder. Others insisted that humanity had the right to protect itself from future exploitation. Commander Lisa Rodriguez presented the intelligence perspective. We need to consider the long-term implications of any decision. If we help them recover, they become our competitors again. If we let them collapse, we face potential security threats from desperate refugees and resource wars. But there's a third option, she continued. We help them enough to prevent total catastrophe while ensuring that their dependence on us continues. We become indispensable partners rather than replaceable workers. The suggestion was controversial, with many humans uncomfortable with the idea of maintaining alien dependence for strategic advantage. It seemed to violate the principles of equality and mutual respect that had motivated their departure. Dr. Thomas Wright, one of humanity's most respected historians, provided historical context. Every great civilization has faced this choice: help former enemies or watch them fall. The Romans helped rebuild the societies they conquered. The Americans rebuilt their enemies after World War II. The pattern suggests that helping others ultimately serves long-term interests better than abandoning them. However, he added, those historical examples involved victorious civilizations helping defeated ones. Our situation is different. We're the essential minority that chose to leave rather than the dominant power imposing our will. As the debate continued, a consensus began to emerge around a complex solution that balanced humanitarian concerns with practical necessities. Humanity would offer assistance, but only under conditions that protected their independence and ensured their contributions were properly recognized. Dr. Sarah Chun stood to present the emerging proposal. We offer conditional assistance based on fundamental changes to galactic governance and human status. No military demands or forced cooperation. No return to previous exploitation patterns. No dismissal of human contributions or intelligence. Our conditions would include formal recognition of humanity as equals in galactic civilization, guaranteed representation in all major governing bodies, protection for human colonies, and independence, acknowledgement that human assistance is essential, not optional. We help save their civilization, but we do it as partners, not servants. We solve their crises, but we get permanent seats at tables where decisions are made. We share our knowledge, but we get credit for our contributions and influence over how they're used. The proposal generated hours of additional debate as representatives considered the details and implications. Some worried that the aliens would never accept such conditions, preferring collapse to admitting human equality. Others argued that the conditions were too lenient and humanity deserved even greater concessions. Finally, after 18 hours of discussion, the vote was called. The decision required a 3/4 majority to pass, ensuring that any choice reflected broad human consensus rather than narrow victory. The result was closer than many expected: 68.7% in favor of conditional assistance, 23.1% opposed, and 8.2% abstaining. Humanity had chosen to help, but only on their own terms. Dr. Sarah Chun was selected to compose the response to Dr. Zaxxon Prime and his Truth Coalition. The message she crafted was simple, direct, and uncompromising. Dr. Zaxxon Prime and members of the Truth Coalition, humanity has received your message and acknowledges the crisis facing galactic civilization. We are prepared to offer assistance, but only under conditions that ensure this crisis never repeats itself. Our assistance is conditional on the following non-negotiable requirements. First, formal recognition of humanity as full equals in galactic civilization, with all rights and privileges accorded to other sentient species. We can help prevent the wars that threaten to destroy what remains of your society. The choice is yours. Accept humanity as equals and receive our partnership, or reject our conditions and face your future alone. We have learned to survive without you. The question is whether you can learn to survive without us. The message was transmitted to the coordinates Dr. Zaxxon Prime had provided, carrying with it the collective will of 12 billion humans who had finally learned their own worth. In the days that followed, humanity waited for a response that would determine the future of both their species and galactic civilization. They had offered a path to salvation, but only on terms of true equality and mutual respect. The galaxy had once dismissed them as primitive and expendable. Now it would discover whether it was willing to accept them as the partners they had always deserved to be. The age of human subservience was over. The age of human partnership was about to begin, if the galaxy was wise enough to accept it. Deep in space, 12 billion humans continued building their new civilization while waiting to learn whether their old one had finally learned the true meaning of equality. Either way, humanity would thrive. The only question was whether they would thrive alone or as part of something greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy's answer would echo through eternity as the moment when the universe learned that some species were too valuable to lose and too proud to be taken for granted ever again.